Hello, Pam Bondi in Waters World, and or Mr. Waters, at and next to Trinity College, your college. I forgot how I learned that, but in other words, on Zion Street, next to Trinity College, and on New Britain Avenue, which note there are two of them parallel, named New Britain Avenue right there. At different campuses, I went through time. It was his recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are the family members of overt criminal enterprises, of private ones, of probate court judges, of other superior court judges, of district court judges, prosecutors, people associated with them and their family members who were slash are increasingly in collusion slash S with people that confessed, recorded, demonstrated, confirmed. A Joshua Stryker is involved with my, and there are roles also with names near me, like a Ray Cololo, also involved with a Joshua Julian and a Mark Violet, and people with the name Oliveri, putting predicate acts with their educators and databases, with people from off campuses. Increasingly, also, it's, in other words, who's guilty or not, and like that is all the difference of that. Everyone's forced to blame other things, others, ourselves. Otherwise, for right where other foreign countries, but also hyper foreign is involved. Because nature showing us that it will only stay increasingly positive or force that from here. Lease of ID, sports-based nature transfer. More probably is how we should define that, and how the ancients defined it. Also means to discern this is how the value of criminally foreign influence databases was reliant upon. It is self-valued by people with the nature of their Boolean logic and descriptions of it regarding the principles of history. Black pupils. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. We know all along we have had nature speaking about, communicating about principles, demonstrate, projecting to us communications about principles. Tactical and crimes. The names of the people of the sciences, including the law, and Miss Bondi and Mr. Waters. Before there were crimes, including murders that are involved with the names next to Trinity College. Also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with names next to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with a whole bunch of people tied to intelligence families that used to live near me. And as one's now, with the name Cololo and Smith, and a whole bunch of people tied to them in their conversations, where their FBI, federal agencies, state police, foreign and domestic, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, at the same time keep getting brought up with their family members too next to these campuses. Maria Pizzino and Stephen Stocco, I believe them as also what my thing's pausing now, the video. In other words, also the monitors of the internet have roles with adults and kids. When I was in grammar school and middle school, who made it look like we had communications. And then later I found out, right before I went to high school, in other words, they're putting me, and when I was in middle school, they're putting me fake nature ties to people I never even saw around the middle school, with as collusions with people from private schools and from and intelligence families with the retired police chiefs from Weathersfield and other police chiefs involved with the ones named O'Brien and Cololo too, with wire crime acts and methods that are also involved with worse predicate acts methods at the same time, because of where and how they have rules with subject treatments. These are also Weathersfield police attached me to paid conversations with themselves and others through time. Trinity College is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming with police forms on and off their campus, including foreign countries at the same time in overt criminal enterprises and co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. And apparently they took my picture, I bet, there next to a Don LeConte, and I believe it was in Hamden, near with a my Heather Hansen and a Joe DeMoro to make a fake exception. I never even had a word of conversation with her in my life. That was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed through communications that they were influenced to make a fake exception. For some ways on their own before that, they were trying to hide that. And some kinds, in other words, there were people who were making all kinds of there are connections between people who made personal confessions to me and requests to me not to say things to other people before I even saw them. And when I saw them, I didn't even know them. These increasingly foreign and domestic intelligence families and interbranch families were used remotely at the same exact time as overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Relative to, and the breaching method, but relative to the breaching method use /S of differences, and of that hyper difference, that the difference of that which is the value progression, as why and how not just our species body has qualities, aspects, and natures that the other species bodies have too. To show us not only that it's not only our species body that has roles with why and how things are the way they are. It's that identity of value progression that no other identity of value progression could mimic without nature demonstrating it. And nature knew that. The breaching method knew that once it forced, tricked, and persuaded, gave no other means but to be names of the people of the sciences from off those locations, maintained hyper additional collusion /S. Styles, needs, and nature shown by the breaching method, how they need to pretend other or be sensed by the breaching method through themselves, like with jobs narratives and the values of it, left out originally and still, how clearer than day. The differences of the overt criminal enterprises or private ones uncharged. And their roles with the interbranch all kinds of evidence reception, racketeering, worse than war crimes, offensively preventing legitimate readings of statutes and precedents of right to remain innocent until proven guilty. They're changing and faking the value of what we say. They're hiding their collusions, pretending that we need to have integrity and the names of the people of the sciences, where all kinds of ways we are obligated every day to understand, like what witch trials are about. Even if they're made up by who made them up, what they made them up for. There were slavery laws entrenched sickly, distinctly against everyone, but against black too, sickly, distinctly, northern colonies and southern colonies, because the breaching method was entrenched. Rather than right where we're supposed to blame that breaching method and have that clearer than day understood by everyone, right through our schools, there are collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and the branches of government, fake motivations, natures of morality narratives, blaming on other things, forcing blame on other things, others themselves, with nature itself, and what our founders communicated to blame on the breaching method, why and how they did not have free speech. They were using James Madison's plan, which is the only hope, to force everyone counter-restored, and the phenomenon of us told to get the Constitution unabridged, and where and how and why we're supposed to appreciate why and how we have rights that are too numerous to have to list them, and why and how there's a breaching method involved with the differences of collusions between the branches of government, the intelligence that never was not with a whole bunch of different countries and their family members too, where and how this breaching method uses remotely how value with communications, collusions with kids and with adults. And increasingly, this is how the breaching method knew that we perceive. And the difference of that at the same time. Because the breaching method understands what nature is showing us about the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous, that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Again, it is not the other species bodies, it is not our own, but it is all things anyway. It is those three grouped parts of time. And that identity that binds it, as the identity that binds them. The part of the past that we know always is true. The part of the future we know always is true. The value of the seasons that aren't even here, even if they never get here, they're only increasing value too. Because of its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that here, or it is forced from here, least of Hadis, which comes with demonstration / S of its identity. To an extent that we can discern, it comes with its complete identity's relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. Further positive onto itself here, or it forces it from here, which is relative to where and to how we are positive and negative the ways we know. But not just additionally how we know, and we can observe that truths were our use for lies. Like what caused slavery? In other words, a human fact treatment nature breaching method caused slavery. And employed and maintains use / uses through ourselves, plural, of other things, others ourselves blamed and forced to be blamed. Right where and how that is only correct and demonstrate. One of the answers that is true always. Racism is not, in fact, it employed people to say that racism was it, enforce that, otherwise the sense for the breaching method, someone trying to address how it employed. Everyone's sickly, distinctly hurt by its laws, but also sickly, non-distinctly. And right where and how our founders communicated for us to understand the torture, extortion, and fact treatment nature slavery method, therefore physically, upon themselves. James Madison, I read that we were directed to refer to our founders, plural, as James Madison, singular. And then they went with his plan and got George Washington to agree to help them and to use that plan and to be the first president. We have the motivations of that were also dictated by the breaching method. No one had free speech. That was declassified. But rather than value that, the communication, the breaching method was replaced and is replaced right from the subject. Right from the communications of our founders as James Madison. We're supposed to appreciate where and how he did not have free speech. And everyone had to pretend other to an extent / extents. Otherwise, that body was sensed. That's the foundation of where and how anyone could be motivated to play music in the background and tell American history. Replacing that with music in the background, replacing why and how everyone had collusions that no one wanted. No one wanted to pretend not to realize too. Otherwise, that body was censored, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everybody. The phenomenon of countries A through Z, the act can only be operated by locations, areas, and states, still entertain criminal and ceaseless natures of positive treatments and negative treatments, collusions, specifically to keep the hyperforeign from being understood and discerned, a hyper-relativity to ourselves. Also, while the identity of hyper-relativity itself has that identity that none other could mimic without it demonstrating. That's still in effect, though effective. This breaching method employed nature's demonstrations of itself, the breaching method too. There are other things that it is true always, that they were true. The laws that were entrenched simultaneously while witch trials were entrenched. Even if it was made up, regardless of who made it up and for what ends. there was a witch trial place right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. And that too, employed by the breaching method, sense and sensibilities, by defenses of motivations for doing that are incapable of defending the nature of logic, the styles of logic, and of affording to be discerned how the Webb House is about how George Washington had to come to counter-extort that which had crazy factory nature, torture, extortion, and slavery rules at key locations /S. Northern and southern colonies both had roles with slavery against black, but against everyone, sickly distinctly. Every difference. When did that same breaching method that had everyone it measured and maintained maintains other communicated for James Madison and for our founders, and they communicated. Again, replacing in self-guided roles, replacing right from their communications the scientific value of the breaching method, of the importance of us understanding why and how they did not have free speech. Why and how, while they were pretending to be able to defend their differences as titles and jobs, it never stopped being timed collusion /S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. And the difference of that, used by the breaching method, but everything the breaching method uses is ourselves using ourselves, or sensing that not entertained, or self-value for the breaching method through other hyper additional apparent and real motivations, even the real ones used remotely though. Because this collusion /S is right where and how nobody wanted collusions. But this is right where and how it's relative to multi-front, sickly, distinctly, the strengths and weaknesses of intelligence at each age of factory nature that are inverted from their natural course, natural /hypernatural, as there is a means for us to check. So increasingly, when I was a kid, and then when I was an adult too, kids and adults at the same time recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They have rules with differences, rackets, with a whole bunch of foreign and domestic families involved with corners of streets, and business, and the differences of the businesses, the customers, or the people just going through or driving by because of the use of location /S by the breaching method. It never stopped being inseparable from all kinds of other natures of things and differences, appreciation, but now through and out systems of appreciation of nature and of syntax, factory nature, quality aspects, nature, through and out systems, tactical ulterior from natures where it communicates about these things and how it appreciates our short words properly. So there are people with the name Leahy involved with a whole bunch of different natures of federal criminals before they were caught. A whole bunch of ways that is recorded, and with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and with the family members of campuses, and including of fire campuses and medical campuses, and the campuses they grew up through, and names next to them at the same time. And it was as manifest that way. Again, because it never stopped being use of location /S. Everywhere the human species body has a body standing. Where and how, since semi-ancient times too, the republic for which we stand and functions by its campuses system. Note where and how the names of the people of sciences are manifest. Their syntax and their names are still used as victim predators /hyper victim, hyper predators. It is important to note how the colonists in the early states stayed victim predator /hyper predator, because note how distinctly, but also not distinctly, and through other apparent identities of possession involved, roles as possessions of roles with predicate acts with facts against the rest of the human species bodies, where they had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, is one example of what was simultaneously recorded. Slash hyper simultaneously. Nature shows us needs to discern how hyper simultaneously, non-distinctly, distinct countries, operating colonies, and overt criminal enterprises and terrorists they were trying to counter, but as collusion's only capable of being self-value. Because also worse was is using all those differences in nature's and value treatments, tactical ulterior from what could appreciate the hyper invisible, but still discernible. For example, as the value of the Constitution unabridged, and of why and of how. We have rights that are too numerous to have to list them. Increasingly, Ray Collot and Joe DeMoro have roles of foreign and domestic military, and people with the name Scalora that they recorded, confessed, demonstrated also with the adults and kids who colluded at and next to the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices, and or driving by it too. The difference is also exploited. All natures of investigations of investigators never stop being roles of predicate acts with facts that are timed collusion /S with people that have nothing to do with it, who are shown that they are kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, finite, active, progressive, individual, grouped, and simultaneous lies and delusions and or collusions with the truths used to lie, to screen motivations, to screen other names' involvements, to further use /S of collusion /S with all instance formally and informally discussed and put in records as collusion /S with all natures of crime scenes and names next to them, increasingly at the same time with the interbranch names and the intelligence tied to them and their family members, putting the same sequence shifts, the same timed collusion /S, and use of their own different uses of their own differences and of other people's differences, remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. There are lawyers of the FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. He's involved with the Robert Chevrolet and names next to his location, who are also doctors involved with all kinds of medicine scams and roles with that and layers, and all kinds of natures of experts recorded consciously, offensively, who pretended that they thought that just because someone had a degree or because they were an expert of some sort, that they're the one that must be telling the truth. Also relative to where and to how Russians in Ukraine, families and their doctors, there are doctors of a Ukrainian woman, in other words, and her families and her neighbors that they don't even know because Joshua Stryker and people on Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College, like a Mark Violet and others, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They've been planting evidences at the campuses I went and with names next to them. And they have a whole bunch of other countries involved with them at the same time. And they know my name, and I don't even know their names. And they have all kinds of people that work for the states and the cities. They use that to quantify where they're defending differences at the same exact time with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, as roles effectively used to pull off the World Trade Center attack. Effectively, you have Saudi names keep roles with effective remote uses, and just like Americans affected uses, screening how criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw is the value of how America has been appreciated syntactically by everyone because of a certain type of victim /hyper victim designed to keep everyone blaming other things, others themselves, even when correctly, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs to keep its collusions with it left out. What's actually recorded. And sometimes even when they record things real, they're hiding what was already recorded different before that while making up fake things. A bunch of people from Wethersfield have wire crime acts and methods. People that sought me out to make it look like they have fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. That are mixed with people I don't know at all, like the Joshua Julian, who had time collusion /S with a proven principal child abuser, and campuses intercities that have been lying to my family about me. Since I caught them doing that, and roles of more abuses of kids, and then they put their own kids involved with it, and with the pictures and the narratives tied to it with the people on Facebook, while they're pretending to be against such, while they've been speaking fake conversations with themselves and with others about it, at all ages and natures. There are foreign and domestic medical families concentrated at corners of streets like Church Streets in Old Wethersfield, involved with also people at the corner of Southstein Highway and Town Line Drive in Wethersfield, Connecticut, Rocky Hill, Connecticut, involved with people increasingly like with the name Kerr and Perone. They have child abusers, leaders of the kids years apart. They had time collusion /S roles with that. And with people bringing up their roles of differences rackets. And the guy switching his name, one of the kids and adults, switching one of the kids switching their names, or a young man switching their name from their identity from Pakistani to Indian. And I'm saying this as the human species body of individual bodies. This breaching method makes us, we have to use other names differences. It only takes one person to jump up and pretend to feel, oh, but that's insensitive, to force that quality of fact, human nature, and then they're changing and faking our short words. Same people pretending they care that good writing is vigorous and concise. On a mass scale, we have overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and interbranch and intelligence side to them, foreign and domestic, and news and names next to them meeting at the same time, consciously changing and faking what they perceive and what they could understand about what others say. All exceptions, exception nature that appear to demonstrate they come with demonstrations of the same things. And they come with demonstrations of how nature communicates. In other words, nature shows us to appreciate difference and exceptions, tactical than we are offensively being forbid to appreciate them. These are people that have, in other words, on a mass scale, the differences, in other words, UConn has roles too, with lawyers and with judges and prosecutors who have digital crime acts and methods. Whiting Forensics has roles with the Facebook page of a principal child offender. Now, these are people who are Black themed, KKK themed, Latino themed with foreign and domestic military. And Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and now as an adult. And at the Wethersfield police station, that wasn't at all. And as an adult, that was also simultaneously how it was recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are police forms and families named Mendez. And there's an older brother of an Eric Mendez, reportedly his older brother. I never had a word of conversation in my life. People said things about him, and he smiled and walked by me a couple of times when I was in high school. And that was years after, like 2 years after someone said about the Eric Mendez. And a year later, I saw him a couple of times for a real quick incident. He was one of the ones influenced as one of the ones connected, like to the people like Joshua Julian, who are involved putting fake things in databases with people on off Harvard Hospital and other campuses, intercities, and as ones involved with Wethersfield, and my neighbors involved with them with untimely deaths, including one at Trinity College, even if it was made up. They were involved with various natures of digital crimes and federal evidences crimes. They involved a Hugh Ogden with reports of his death were also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, involved with wire crimes and federal evidences crimes and criminally foreign influence uses of and control and controls over the senses and sensibilities of investigations and of investigators and of names at and next to the news locations. Increasingly, names next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, have roles with names directly and indirectly along Route 3 and its conjunctions, like the state judicial branch offices, increasingly concentrated at 2-Route Highway and its conjunctions, which are people I don't know at all, and people I only know sought me out to make fake exceptions of knowing me, and then to lie about how and why their motivations were with that. Also, the people involved with them that also influenced them to that. The differences of it and the timing of it is also rules, because these are people with all sides and all natures of investigators, collusion/S, and all natures of crime scenes, including at 3 spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike, are increasingly people I don't know at all, who have been searching for means to pretend other, as their collusion/S with people increasingly and next to the state capitol and two. So in other words, two, people on all sides. I'm from Wethersfield, and there are people on all sides of fields who offensively have roles with identity theft, frauds, and slanders. And natures of identity theft, frauds, in other words, and collusion/S with various natures of organized crimes at and next to spots associated with the World Witch Trials place, next to Webb House, renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, where George Washington had to come to counter-extort to force the rest of the founders. And the plan and means to counter, to force, means to win the last battle of the Revolutionary War, which was against not just England. Slavery was entrenched by internationally monitored conversations, and worse than that, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, all that stuff, and the difference of that used remotely by the breaching methods since semi-ancient times. We have left out how even self-valued, it was recorded how he used remotely self-valued roles with criminally foreign influence database identities of relativity to ourselves. Criminally foreign influence quality aspects of fact treatment nature itself, use/uses, collusions with all natures of debate. Having black pupils, whites of eyes is inseparable from this. So Mark Violet has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, and through communications distinct from what he said. He has some different natures, different people, inter-services involved with intelligence with the Marines and Air Force, for example. There's a Paul Kelly. I never had a word of conversation with him. He made statements. He was in my presence for a brief moment as one of the people along Ridge Road, which is one of the conjunctions to Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, which is one of the things that connects a whole bunch of people that went out years apart too, that went out of their way to make it look fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Who that was is exploited also as World Trade Center attack, predicate acts roles, but through a breaching method. Where and how as victims/hyper victims only capable, only allowed to be collusion that way. If we try to appreciate it that way, the fate can change what we say. So in other words, this is also relative to where and to how. There are black and white female judges involved also with the Joshua Julian, with the confessions of the Mark Violet, by his rules also with the Mike Violet, and the girl dragged to her death from that spot for her roles with her from the spot she was dragged from. The girl on the even if that was made up, that girl had the roles with that spot with the Mark Violet and Mike Violet, involved with a whole bunch of people like a Leahy family that put me in fake transcripts with them and pretended that through the mail. And I can't get anyone to help me syntactically. These people with psychiatry, they've been putting, if you're going to speak, I went to speak with a Christina Sciocca because she has criminally foreign tactical delusions, raw takes on American history and rolls with all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes with the bodies that are supposed to be countering it, collusions with her and them, interstates with my neighbors and their extended family members, involved with Miami, Orlando, a whole bunch of different countries, including Saudi Arabia with them, those terrorists. The readings of the Old Testament and of the Quran, collusions against themselves. The Old Testament says, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together. In the part that comes before it. Oh, but we don't believe in the Old Testament, but we believe in the New Testament. Okay, fine. You don't leave out the fact that comes before the part with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You can't be honest about the difference of that. It says only defend right here. The sequence shifts are self-valued there. A distinct identity of order, no, which is reliant upon other natures of order to be valued simultaneously, to value the individual identity of order that is true always and also positive unto itself. Not as positive as criminal and seditious natures of positive. So increasingly, a number of ways. At and next to Trinity College, a number of people have retired police chiefs from Wethersfield and a Joshua Stryker and a Joshua Julian involved with Facebook pages of a principal upskirt nature, involved with way worse organized crimes with the kids. The same names were involved with elderly homes with them at the same time. And one's associated with this where and how the state corrections offices are manifest. Increasingly, these are people who have been spreading lies about me to people I needed to do business with at boxing gyms in Connecticut and next to their homes and locking their neighbors to collusion/S with judges and prosecutors and the FBI before the World Trade Center attack, who were printing predicate acts with facts, rules, and wrongdoing with other countries at town lines, at crime scenes, next to them, as collusion/S. Increasingly, people that I never had conversations with at my campuses will tell you. They're just repeating other fake things that others told them to pretend. And the campuses, people will tell you as they already recorded anyway, which is other than the pretending is recorded from off the campuses. There are people, a bunch of people from the Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, the Connecticut District Court, and a bunch of people on out the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices. There have been timed collusion/S with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. And where they have defenses of uses of words like radical and like extremism. Facebook has rules changing and faking what people say on there, but also with the agencies. The FBI also has rules with this. A Joshua Schumack is one of the ones also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting faked and changed evidences and collusions with others with a Joshua, also with a per the Mark Violet. And his mother is involved with the Facebook page. I never had a conversation with his mother. These are people that that are tied by how they take pictures of themselves, try to put fake ties and fake natures of ties to be, and use all exception nature, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw too. Has something to do with the roles with spots next to where the Wethersfield Police Department is now, since before it was there. And that's also at a town line, though, right before Hartford. And there's an electronics place there, increasingly involved with FBI directors, plural, and other agencies, involved with people named tomorrow, involved with those family members and their roles with, stacking illusions and databases. And with U/S of that as a collusion/S, where at the same time the differences of the collusions as names on all sides of cases, the lawyers, their sources, their family members, their neighbors, the news, the same thing, names or the court's names. Originally and still, this was per the same method that had and has other things, others ourselves forced to be blamed for where and how. People had roles motivated and nature's motivated to entertain, those crazy, the crazy agenda, the crazy standing state of things that originally and still is. The suburbs were designed by a torture, extortion, back human nature, slavery method that the colonists could have built safer, better. Clearly, we don't hunger and thirst and long to see beautiful water so we can put it all underground. Leave industry on top of water. Leave industry left out with its roles. Our founders communicated not to leave out the roles with the difference of guilt. Witch trials about, and all those laws simultaneously were about how the difference between the guilt of the three branches of government, the intelligence tied to them, the people that were committing crimes, ones as overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, anything that breaching method needed to keep anyone from being able to communicate what was actually recorded, what was and is actually unfolding. In other words, the names of countries themselves are tortured, extorted, and enslaved, vacuum nature enslaved, therefore physically. They're only capable of comparing themselves and of defending that. They're not capable of correlation relative to the importance of us paying attention to where and how, being and having been replaced. Right from the communications of our founders is the scientific value of the human factory of nature breaching method. So psychiatry had all kinds of medicines, crimes, and criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions wrought, natures of organized crimes at the same time, and needing to pretend other, while as people involved with all the actual drugs. But these are people attaching people to faked and changed, like natures of uses of alcohol. They're trying to take pictures of people and change it, fake what's recorded. Lie, only capable of lying about the responses. And I've recorded why and how. Increasingly, people tied to mayors from Weathersfield, like former Mayor Gold and his family members, like people involved with a Christopher Cullen and a Joseph Aiello. Our people have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people tied to them, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, spreading illusions with them with child offenders, leaders of kids. I'm not saying they have roles with abuses of kids, sexual and medical. Well, they have medical roles with sexual or abuses of kids, including sexual to an extent they know. Joe Aiello and others named Kerr and Demorrow and Kalal recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they've been planting evidences. Also with people with the name Carone have been planting evidences with former mayors and a former Mayor Gold and his family members on the sides of Millwoods Park through time, and at Millwoods Park through time. These are also people collusions with people that work with the Parks and Recreation through time, who have roles with some untimely deaths and overt drugs and medicines crimes with kids and with doctors and their patients, collusions, including if they are unmarked police forms. They run into high lie progressions, also with their uses of their differences, also with their criminally foreign influence, their roles with criminally foreign influence, research, data, evidence, racketeering, worse than war crimes. Two, relative into how this is what black people's white lives are capable of discerning. A human factory nature breaching method worse than war crimes. And the differences of guilt roles, right where and how that guilt would be and is increasingly manifest with nature's demonstrations to us. This breaching method effectively uses and used those demonstrations to show the identities, the names of the people, signs, exceptions they need to keep, those used to keep other things others themselves blame for things they can't afford to have discerned proper, because that would require a quality of fact human nature that would reveal collusion / tests of all natures on a mass scale, including the people that have been speaking about crimes as collusions with whole wire crime acts and methods that are simultaneously collusion / as consciously to an extent as roles with tactically distinct, but use non-distinctly two distinct natures of organized crimes to totally distinct ones. These are also people that told lies behind my back to my science class teachers and to my English class teachers and with ones distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Increasingly, this is where how they make confessions when they want to debate things, where they know that they can't afford to have discerned what actually was recorded, the value of the branches of government, of the names of people of sciences, and of overt criminal enterprise private ones at the same time. UConn has syntax with various natures of media voicings to have conversations with people that claim to be Los Solitos and involved with them, with courts and with federal agencies that are also involved next to Harvard Hospital, with people forging and switching names and sequences and putting delusions in databases together, fake motivations for why they make their opinions about other people, including when they're they're affected to for real reasons. They use those truths for lies, as collusion / test. That's also recorded. They also leak things that way by forcing groupthink. Note, which was a phrase reportedly associated with the Donald Rumsfeld. As more World Trade Center attack predicate acts after the World Trade Center, like W3 FSB, Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack. And I was in the court next to the World Trade Center as an observer right before the World Trade Center attack. And I know that the court itself and names on all sides of that case and names at other spots next to the World Trade Center and the World Trade Center are names at it, where attached to fake and changed communications with others and with myself before the World Trade Center, leading up to it, long-term and short-term, in the World Trade interstates and internationally the same ones, further hyper-internationally recorded. You guys want to control conversations at the same time to fake and change what's actually recorded and pretend that other people are doing it. You guys are making confessions when you ask confessions, when you ask questions too. People A through Z. At the same time, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. So there's a Brian Silver too, increasingly involved with these people named Leahy, involved with also a prosecutor named Salisbury, with a bunch of foreign and domestic military and medical and judges' family members involved with the same house / S and a whole bunch of people tied to them with wire crimes and with the falsified police reports, also tied to the ones where the police attached me to fake conversations with them at the police department as a kid, and then as an adult too. And as an adult, I did go down there, but I had no conversations with any police at all. I made one sentence through my Saudi friend, to my Saudi friend, and one of the Mendez police attached me to fake conversation with him about that, which was simultaneously recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed before that. Collusions with a Bob Chase and by others with a Phil Colo involved with him, with a Eric Mendez, increasingly with a Phil Colo and people on Tura Highway, and with various natures of conjunctions to it, who all sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm through the years. They were influenced to various natures of federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, people tied to Kevin Dillon. And he's recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. And I never had a word of conversation with him. These are people also with former director of the FBI, non-verbally confirmed things right after other strangers tried to make it look like they had syntactical conversations with me that weren't at all. And with other people with non-verbal confirmations at the same time, like Allison Mulcahy. And she has other family members I don't even know the names of. I never met Allison Mulcahy. The only time I was ever in her presence. One time she walked by me right before a 2006 district court case in New Haven. But she walked by me near Thaddeus Grabowski, who was one of the defendants in that case. One of the co-defendants with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act. Also a former Mayor Gold and his family members. I recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with a number of people involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, proven and further recorded, associated with the Allison Mulcahy. Per Mike DeMaine, too, who's involved with my Miss Riley, with and other women judges involved with abuses of female girls roles, with men involved with that, and it has something to do with their roles with intelligence jobs, intercities, and at next campuses, with ones who are also Washington D.C. and World Trade Center involved, roles with all natures of investigators, being and having been used remotely, criminally, for and influence, tactically, delusions, raw, shown needs to hide this by affecting by exploiting anomaly, like where and how no one's looking into databases that are medical, and the only ones that are defending identity titles and what's in there dishonestly, because it's fake in there. They're putting fake transcripts. They're forging doctors' names. There's a Dr. Shamsi Ali. I never had a conversation with him at all. He confessed to me over the phone at his house. They must have, he didn't say they forged his name, but he said, well, I don't even work there. I don't know how that got on there. Because they put me in fake conversations with him too, this Leahy family. There's a Judge Killian involved with his family members. There's a Judge Smith involved with family members, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, changing and faking digital evidences with whiting forensics, with a Joshua Julian, and with Wethersfield police and retired police chiefs and their families and intimate ties, and their kids involved with that, with sexual and medical offenders of other kids. And they got their own kids abused too with the pictures. So the difference of that is also exploited. So they have the kids of Leahy families, more than one Brendan Leahy, but they have women in their family too. As a bunch of people at Hartford Hospital involved directly and indirectly with people that live near me, named Cole and Smith, that a bunch of people next to Trinity College recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, are involved with them, planting evidences there with them. And with influence to communicate with me by others dishonestly and using truths to lies. So they have me in fake communications ever with a Joshua Stryker and sequence shifts roles. When I was a kid, behind my back, into campuses, databases, with people that were also involved with it then when I was an adult, intercities, at Trinity College. I don't know what he said to the Joshua to Dean Alford, but they lied to a Dean Alford, and they lied to girls there that I don't know at all. And the one that made confessions, I only know her seeking me out to make confessions by timing where I was going to be. And as the people that lied to my science class teachers, and their roles when switching with the neighbors of the Dr. Shuba of modern languages, and his family members' roles with the various courts, including probate court judges, involved with all kinds of natures of sick things with elderly homes, and with all natures of and with medical campuses. Psychiatry is detectively delusions raw. How could they have left out how we have black pupils, whites of eyes, and a breaching method reassigned that communications by that? Nature would have brought this up if they weren't collusion/S with identity theft, fraud, slanders, all kinds of drugs and medicines crimes. The only bodies capable allowed to counter such, not by accident, kept needing to hide life progressions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones when I was a kid, and then time years later, at the same time, same use of corners. Who knows Joshua Stryker from Weathersfield, especially ones with conjunctions to the corners on Griswold Street. Increasingly, Harvard Hospital has a bunch of people involved with Harvard Hospital that have been putting fake change ties to me. It has something to do with their roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders along Griswold Street. Please, people on Griswold Street, get the Weathersfield police on paper, one name and sequence, and with the fire departments. The fire departments are refusing to identify an Inspector Mike, which is involved with multiple people named Mike, involved with predicate acts on all sides of my house, with a Kevin Dillon and other people involved with them, with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, first forced years apart. But they have other natures of organized crimes roles with them, and their roles with the intelligence community at the spots associated with themselves and next to themselves. Eric Jensen said on Morgan Circle, he had educators and people associated with a swim team involved with a Heather Hansen and a Joe DeMoro, and his roles with a Mike Roberts, and people on Morgan Circle there with people with the name Kerr on Morgan Circle, who have been planting evidences with police on Facebook, like the Facebook with the Joshua Julian and others I don't even know the names of, with the principal upskirt nature and other sexual and medical offenders of kids and passions crimes where people are trying to hide what's actually recorded, where they were planting evidences at locations because they have collusion/S, where and how used remotely are names at all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts at the same time, because everyone's covering up use of location/S collusions, like with predicate acts with facts. Otherwise, that body is sensed and it is adapted to. I believe that body is the majority of people. That's really why how, even though nature is increasingly demonstrating to us, we have black people's whites of eyes, and it comes with revelations. It comes with how we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. And per that which is not us nor them, the other species bodies that also have two eyes. They also have quality aspects, nature, like consciousness and the nature of consciousness. But you guys make it not led by the hyper invisible, but still discernible. Not led by the difference between that distinct identity of simultaneous nature and what is just simultaneous nature. As one of the things that is shown to us as the value of a species body, it is a simultaneously manifest thing with individual bodies of that species body, with all group differences. In generation of what generates all differences, and what generates all exception nature that appear to be demonstration of other, and demonstration of the same thing/S, and how it uses high exceptions exception nature the ways we know. And then further, as further significance of it, as further value of it, in ways we are not, we know and could appreciate more, but we aren't valued even, we aren't even appreciated, we aren't even allowed to use that which is hyper evidential. If one has black people's whites of eyes and no research at all, and someone else has stacks of research, they should be able to like that and to get over on the, it's a hyper, all kinds of revelations are recorded just by how we have black people's whites of eyes, and that was left out by the breaching methods employment, reassignments of black and white with the value of those laws. The value as a human fact, human nature breaching method. Value as a differences racketeering method, worse than war crimes. Value as a criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method. So, Fred Grisey also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he has roles interstates and internationally with child offenders, leaders of kids. And on my street, that there are adults and kids that also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have roles with him. Also, former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, and his co-defendants and their family members, interstates, Boston, Connecticut, New York, people with a Fred Grisey involved with a Staten Island. Could anyone get him onto paper with the police forging and switching names and their collusions with a police chief, Cintron, and his family members and people tied to them? And like a Mayano family, a Fred Grisey recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He has roles with various natures of federal evidences, crimes, identity thefts, and frauds with the Mayano family, and abuses of the family members of a bakery he worked at, where how him and the Mayano family have roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders to me, hiding things about me, relative, and making them up about to a modern pastry. Also with people from Mazzucato Bakery, involved also interstates with a Fred Grisey, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and predicate acts on my streets with people involved with wire crimes and falsified police reports, and planting evidences all along Route 175 and its conjunctions from the old Weathersfield locations through time. So please, I don't even know all their names. Fred Grisey is one of the ones who sought me out to make all these confessions and to record things that they hid, that they were recorded by federal law, obligated not to hide. Increasingly, so retired police chiefs have roles with 80 Carroll Drive on Connecticut, involved with prosecutors and judges, involved with falsified police reports with them, and putting me to fake ties and fake natures of ties to people who have timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, putting fake, sequence shifts with them. That's what's recorded, involved with their needing to pretend that why and how I went to a wedding party of Chris Walters was other than it was. That was a part of Chris Walters' confessions and demonstrations to me about his roles with people on, off, and between campuses, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, including abuses of them of mixed natures of organized crime and abuses of himself. These aren't families legitimately with intelligence, foreign and domestic as they are all along Route 175 from founding locations, collusion/S, increasingly with people at Central Connecticut State University and UConn involved with and next to Hartford Hospital locations. Chris Walters also has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed collusions with a Mike Pandolf with intelligence next to Trinity Central Connecticut State University in Britain, who colluded also next to Hartford Hospital, and with their syntax with natures from Washington, D.C., involved with 2 speech class teachers I had, involved with increasingly with on off the state corrections offices and its conjunctions, and the state judicial branch offices in conjunctions, and names next to campuses involved with identity theft and frauds and slanders against others, with the people at the campuses and from off them, and layers with overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time. That's also relative to why and how they've been making repeated subject treatments, like if men should play in girls' sports, and the counters to it have been repeated roles, measuring and maintaining their collusions, not when told on, ignored in roles with that too, because they are being haven't been used remotely to do that. So WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others, while WFSB did, Connecticut Channel 3 News, while WTNH, their sources, they planted evidences at corners of streets and next to a school of a principal child offender camp, where they have parents and their kids involved with that, and everyone's attaching, and they were lied to be, they're being cultivated roles. There are people with the name O'Neill involved also with World Trade Center attack and with the counters as collusions. I don't know if they're related to the guy reportedly who killed Osama bin Laden. But the intelligence community has all kinds of criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, readings of the Quran and of the Old Testament and of reality. And increasingly have roles with differences racketeering worse than war crimes, and as the value of their uses of their own differences and of ours. So increasingly, a Ray Claw and recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed he has collusions with people that are KKK, black theme, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme. They're putting fake things with their educators and databases and people from off campuses. And these are the ones that I don't even know at all. In other words, and the ones that are the ones I do know, they're pretending fake things. But no, I love my teachers. Only Mr. Neville is one of the ones that's putting predicate acts in databases roles. I'm not even a lawyer. There's a Trantola involved with the interbranch and the lawyers and the news putting the same predicate acts with facts in identity thefts and fraud slanders, and same delusions relative. Delusions are also involved with why and how anyone could get away with so long, leaving things like black pupils, whites of eyes inseparable from subjects like slavery, so sacred by nature to us, to understand, to pay attention to honestly. We would have brought up the human fact, human nature breaching method. So next to an at Mr. Waters World's campus, our roles with a Joshua Stryker, with my neighbors and people tied to them who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed him involved with them with some untimely deaths, and my previous neighbors. A Terry Cleesa, and then he had the name Terry Lewis on Facebook. I basically never had a quote in the conversation with him at all on Facebook and in life. The only exception, one of the exceptions I ever had a conversation with him in my life was one of the elderly homes, where how he was enrolled also at Trinity College. It's not far from there. That's also involved with the name Bayrock on a street sign off of Two Rod Highway, and how it was near that elderly home one time. I don't know if it was put on there temporary or what. What has something to do with that town line, with judges and prosecutors involved with the house near me, /S. And I'm saying it like that makes it, in other words, they brought this up. Police confession, they're forcing people to speak through others, where also they brought up groupthink. And these are people involved with their extended family members, with Saudi attackers, and with Saudis I knew before I knew them. And I didn't know that, but I learned more and more about that. And I never said anything to that, so you can't. They just fake and change what everyone said anyway. They forced her to collusions with the O'Neill, with Whiting Forensics, refusing to get on paper with the judges and prosecutors, putting fake and changed things, sequence shifts, inclusions. Increasingly, people tied to a Brian Silver and a Rick Sanfaglione and a Leahy family have been planting evidences with a whole bunch of other people in my area. People involved with home break-ins with a Joe DeMauro and a Heather Hansen, and she had home break-in roles with other people too in my area. And these are people that had roles with U/S of untimely deaths years apart, with their time the U/S of their roles with the same ones involved in the same location/S involved, like the people involved with the untimely death of Trinity College, involved with a house near me on Pond Street, on Pondside, involved with people I don't even know. They're trying to make fake exceptions, and they have syntax regarding that and their motivations for it. Because part of their motivations is a foreign breaching method and rolls with that a whole bunch of different countries overt criminal enterprises, private ones, interbranch names, their state offices, their news names next to them at the same time with other kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, planting them offensively, having been doing such, where and how shown needs to. Everyone has been victims/hyper victims, making subject treatments, leaving out roles with uses of predicate acts with facts. Roles, because that's what it is when everyone replaces what our founders actually communicated to us. Everyone's used remotely self-valuing that being and having been done. Everyone's self-valuing with the every nature of debate, the quality aspects and natures of debate. I can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to retract short words with convictions proper, let alone convictions with guilt, leaving out the breaching method roles. In the breaching method use of location/S. Increasingly, Sandy Hook campuses, including a prison there, had and has roles of people directly, indirectly, tied to one's name Kerr, one's name DeMauro, one's name Kalal, involved with corrections and judicial branch offices in founding locations in corners of streets and next to parks and at parks. They've been planting evidences consciously and pretending not to realize consciously as and why and how they have roles motivating. They have rules with the interbranch motivated to forge and switch names and refuse their writing since I was a kid, so they could stack more fake writing in databases and confessions. They switched the arresting officers' names intercities. The same ones interstates though, and foreign at the same time. One's named DeMauro have people with intelligence with Italy, involved also with psychiatry, with people from Ukraine and Russia, and educators of a Joe DeMauro are increasingly involved with sexual and medical offenders, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, kids that don't even know each other on campuses, and involved with kids where they make one quick assumption with their educators, and then they pretend they know the person. I don't even think Joe DeMauro was in my fifth grade class. He has something to do with it with an O'Brien family with police departments, intercities, and former mayors who have been roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, all kinds of database illusion stacking, identity theft, fraud, slanders roles, sequence shift planting roles, falsified police reports roles, news predicate acts roles, news identity theft, fraud, slanders roles, news collusions at and next to all natures of campuses, collusions with all kinds of torture methods at prisons to keep the people's mouth shut about details and about their rules actually with what's manifest, if associated with a serial killer, a reported serial killer, and his body dumping spot and the names next to it. Increasingly, one's involved with the phenomena of the illusions of the kids that from other classrooms and kids in my classroom have to fake and change ties to me on and off campuses. They'll tell you this themselves. I'm not complaining about anyone that I didn't ask to get on paper with the interbranch forging and switching names. And even when I'm complaining about them, they're lying about what they think about that. That's also recorded. That's also why they can't get on paper to one name and sequence. They invested whole careers. It's only 10 years. Doesn't, they have them every day, more and more. Criminally poor influence, toxic delusions, wrong. We just need to have truths not used for lies. And we have to have we have to have a quality of fact, human nature, quality of free speech, force not to leave out the smallest finite detail, force not to leave out the sequence shifts, force not to leave out how they're stacking role self-value with other communicating from at each age of fact, human nature. Then what each age of fact, human nature is capable of discerning being communicated to us by nature. And others being, science hasn't spoke for elderly homes. God forbid, of campuses of all ages and natures. These kids aren't, we need health care. You guys been behind the healthcare initiatives, leaving out how the reason you need it. Because there are torture, extortion, slavery methods /S roles, with the /S part used to hide the hiring through. Ugh. They can't afford to have mandated law filed property at any location. They have to hide the value of what the real actual value was when they used words like control, when they asked questions, when they pretended motivations that were untrue. They're only capable of doing this. And they have delusions that we are capable of showing them. But then they're going to discern it. That's why they're hiding and plotting and waiting to adapt. They're not trying to learn legitimately. Please, Pam Bondi, get Joshua Stryker onto paper with my neighbors involved with the untimely death at Trinity College and fake conversation be a fake letter they pretended I sent to a what's his name? Hugh Ogden. Then they said he was dead. He fell through ice. They might have faked that because there were people involved with, Maine and the bordering countries like Canada and people involved with Mexico at the same time. They implied that she might have been involved, a girl from New Mexico who I never had a word of conversation with. And I was I was never rude to her, or anything like that, or around her. These are people with the borders through time, at and next to the campuses, intercities, like people on all sides of Central Connecticut State University, and Trinity College and Harvard and New Britain. They have a whole bunch of people that different periods of time. They had collusions with planting illusions on my street, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and the groups associated with them, and like the people associated with them in my area, as the ones increasingly involved with police, putting me in fake conversations with themselves as a kid into the database at the Weathersfield police station, and as an adult, sickly distinctly too, but sickly non-distinctly, which comes with evolution, with demonstrations of more, right? Where and how they confess with this stuff too. And they pretend other, and they want to have debates about the syntax. That's also how they confess things and pretend other for the breaching method, which is also recorded being confessed and then pretending other. But that's recorded. So that's why they can't get onto paper. The Britain Superior Court has a bunch of people too, directly and indirectly recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's Eric Mendez, also involved with them with sexual and medical offenders of kids and forced leaders of kids years apart. They had time collusion /S roles with two of the family members of the security of the schools, and where and how really things are involved with hiring people. So we're going to examine this.